Commander Celia stood at the observation deck of the Harmony's Edge, watching the swirling amber clouds of Kepler 438b rotate lazily below. Beautiful planet, really. Shame nobody was allowed to actually visit the damn thing. "Otto," she called to the holographic display flickering to life beside her. "Remind me again why we're sitting in orbit around a perfectly habitable world, twiddling our thumbs like tourists at a museum." The AI's projection adjusted his tiny bow tie because apparently even artificial intelligence had a sense of style these days. "Well, Commander, according to Galactic Council Directive 2381b, any planet under the protection of a Class A civilization requires strict adherence to non-interference protocols. The Krintak have declared this world off-limits to all foreign species. Something about, let me check my files. Yes, protecting the sacred development of primitive life forms." Celia snorted. Sacred development. Right, because nothing says sacred like parking a battlecruiser in orbit and telling everyone else to buzz off. She'd been stationed here for 8 months now, ostensibly conducting long-range xenobiological surveys of the planet's surface. What that really meant was sitting in space, running passive scans and filing reports that nobody would ever read about cloud formations and atmospheric pressure. Thrilling stuff, truly. The highlight of her week was usually watching the Krintak patrol ships do their rounds. Sleek, crystalline vessels that moved through space like deadly jellyfish, all tentacles and sharp edges. The Krintak themselves were, well, calling them intimidating would be like calling a supernova a bit warm. Picture a cross between a praying mantis and a Gothic cathedral. If Gothic cathedrals had 6 arms and could rip through steel plating with their bare claws. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian and compound eyes that could probably spot a dust mote from 3 systems away. And they really, really didn't like visitors. "Commander," Otto's voice carried just a hint of digital concern. "I'm detecting another transmission from the surface. Same frequency as before." Celia's attention snapped back to the present. "Let me hear it." The audio crackled through the bridge speakers, distorted by atmospheric interference and distance. But underneath the static, clear as daylight, was the sound that had been haunting her for weeks. Crying. Not just any crying, the desperate, heart-wrenching sobs of children. "Analysis, Otto. The vocal patterns are consistent with juvenile distress calls, Commander. However, the linguistic structure doesn't match any known Krintak dialects. In fact," the AI paused, which was never a good sign. When artificial intelligence needed time to process something, you knew you were dealing with either a miracle or a catastrophe. "In fact, what, Otto?" "The phonetic patterns are remarkably similar to human speech, Commander. Specifically, they match the dialect variations we'd expect from isolated colonial communities." Celia felt her blood chill. "That's impossible. There haven't been any human settlements in this sector for 52 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Commander. The last recorded human presence was the colony ship New Geneva, which disappeared during a routine exploration mission." She stared at the planet below, its amber clouds suddenly looking less beautiful and more like a shroud. "Otto, how confident are you in that analysis?" 86%, Commander. The probability increases to 92% when accounting for linguistic drift in isolated populations." The crying continued, fading in and out like a ghostly radio signal. Somewhere down there, if Otto was right, human children were calling for help. And here she was, stuck in orbit by a bunch of bureaucratic nonsense and alien politics. "Commander," Otto's tone shifted to what she'd learned to recognize as his diplomatic warning voice. "I feel obligated to remind you that any attempt to investigate these transmissions would constitute a direct violation of Council orders. The Krintak have been quite explicit about the consequences of unauthorized planetary contact." Oh, had they ever. Just last month, Elder Mordak himself had paid the Harmony's Edge a visit. Celia still remembered the way his massive form had barely fit through the airlock, all clicking mandibles and razor-sharp courtesy. The conversation had been memorable. "Commander Celia," Mordak had said, his voice like grinding stone, "we trust you understand the delicate nature of our arrangement with your Galactic Council." "Of course, Elder. We're here purely in an observational capacity. Good. Good. One of his 6 arms had gestured toward the planet below. The surface dwellers are fragile, primitive. Contact with advanced species could contaminate their natural development. We have seen such tragedies before. Naturally. We have similar protocols for pre-warp civilizations. Excellent. Mordak's compound eyes had fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Then you will understand why any unauthorized contact must be prevented. For the greater good, of course. The way he'd said prevented had made it clear that prevention might involve her ship becoming a very brief, very bright star. But now, listening to those cries, Celia couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with this whole situation. The Krintak were an ancient species, masters of biotechnology and stellar engineering. Their own homeworld was a paradise of living architecture and symbiotic ecosystems. Why would they need to hover protectively over some primitive species like overprotective parents? Otto, pull up everything we have on Krintak history, specifically their previous encounters with developing civilizations. Certainly, Commander. The AI's projection flickered as he accessed the databases. Interesting. According to historical records, the Krintak have a rather hands-off approach to primitive species. In fact, they typically avoid contact entirely, preferring to let natural evolution take its course. So, why are they so invested in this particular planet? An excellent question, Commander. One that I'm afraid our current data cannot answer. The crying came again, stronger this time, clearer. And unless Celia's ears were playing tricks on her, she could swear she heard actual words mixed in with the sobs. Human words. Help us. Please. Somebody help us. Otto, she said quietly. What's the range on our stealth reconnaissance pods? The AI's bow tie seemed to wilt slightly. Commander, I really must advise against whatever you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything, Otto. I'm just asking about our equipment specifications. The Mark Thuin pods have a maximum range of approximately 2,000 kilometers, with full stealth capability and minimal sensor signature. However, and how long would it take to reach the surface? Commander. How long, Otto? A long pause. 18 minutes, 43 seconds. But Commander, if the Krintak detect, they won't. Celia was already moving toward the equipment lockers. Because you're going to make sure of that, aren't you? Commander Celia, I am programmed to ensure your safety and the success of this mission. What you're proposing is... What I'm proposing, Celia interrupted, pulling on her environmental suit, is investigating a potential distress signal. It's practically in the manual, Otto. Page 68. All Galactic Council personnel are required to render aid to beings in distress, regardless of species or political affiliation. Page 68 also includes the caveat, within the bounds of existing diplomatic agreements and safety protocols. Details, Otto, details. She sealed her helmet and ran a quick systems check. Everything green. The pod bay was just 2 decks down, and the Mark 19 reconnaissance pods were designed for exactly this kind of mission. Fast, quiet, and nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Otto, I need you to create a small sensor ghost. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make it look like I'm still on the bridge reviewing reports. Commander, I cannot be party to OTTO. Her voice carried the tone that had gotten her through 15 years of deep space exploration, and more than a few encounters with hostile species. There are children down there, human children, if your analysis is correct, and they're calling for help. The AI was quiet for a long moment. Finally, his projection straightened its bow tie. The sensor ghost will last approximately 3 hours before the logs show discrepancies. That's all I need. As Celia made her way to the pod bay, the crying continued to echo through the ship's communication systems. Somewhere below, in the amber clouds and alien landscape of Kepler, 438b, someone was waiting for help. And maybe, just maybe, she was about to find out why the Krintak were so determined to keep everyone away from their primitive little planet. The pod bay doors sealed behind her with a soft hiss, and Celia couldn't help but smile grimly as she powered up the Mark 20. After 8 months of sitting on her hands, and filing pointless reports. It felt good to finally do something, even if it was probably going to get her court-martialed or vaporized by alien battlecruisers. But hey, at least she wouldn't be bored anymore. The Mark 14 pod cut through Kepler 438b's atmosphere like a knife through butter, its stealth systems humming quietly as Celia piloted it toward the source of the transmissions. The amber clouds parted around her viewport, revealing a landscape that was, well, not exactly what she'd expected from a primitive world. Crystalline spires jutted from forested valleys like frozen lightning, their surfaces gleaming with the same bioluminescent patterns she'd seen on Crintac ships. Ancient structures, clearly alien in design, dotted the landscape in perfect geometric formations. This wasn't some backwards planet full of cave-dwelling primitives. This was a world that had been shaped, molded, and cultivated by an advanced civilization. "Otto, are you getting this?" she whispered into her comm. "Indeed, Commander. The architecture suggests Crintac origin, dating back several millennia. However, I'm also detecting more recent construction. Much more recent." "How recent?" "Approximately 50 years, Commander. The same time frame as the New Geneva's disappearance." Celia felt her stomach tighten as the pieces began to form a very unsettling picture. She followed the distress signal deeper into a canyon system, where the ancient Crintac structures gave way to something else entirely. Crude, but effective shelters built into cave openings, constructed from salvaged metal, and what looked suspiciously like starship hull plating. Smoke rose from carefully concealed fire pits, and she could see the unmistakable geometry of human engineering in the way the shelters were arranged for maximum defense and resource sharing. "Colony layout," she breathed. "Otto, these aren't primitive aliens. This is a human settlement." "Commander, I'm detecting multiple life signs in the cave system below. Approximately 15 to 20 individuals, most of them small. Children." She was looking at a colony of human children, somehow surviving on an alien world under the very noses of their supposed protectors. Celia brought the pod down in a clearing about half a kilometer from the cave entrance, using the tree cover to mask her landing signature. As she powered down the systems, she could hear voices, actual human voices, drifting through the forest. "Told you to stay close to the caves, Penny." "But I saw a glittery thing. It might have been tech salvage." "Everything's glittery, on this stupid planet. That doesn't mean you should chase after it." Celia crept through the underbrush, following the voices. Through a gap in the crystalline trees, she saw them. 2 human children, arguing in the way that only siblings could. The boy looked to be about 8, with dark hair and the kind of serious expression that spoke of too much responsibility at too young an age. The girl was maybe 6, blonde and fierce, with the fearless curiosity that should have been charming instead of heartbreaking on a world full of dangers. They were dressed in a mixture of human colonial clothing and what appeared to be Crintac fabric, shimmering, adaptive material that shifted color with their movements. Both children moved with the easy confidence of people who knew their environment intimately, but their eyes held a wariness that no child should ever possess. "Jonah, look." The little girl, Penny, pointed at something in the distance. "The crystal song is getting louder." "That's not crystal song. That's a patrol warning," Jonah replied, grabbing his sister's hand. "We need to get back to the caves. Now." "Crystal song? Patrol warning?" These kids were speaking a dialect that mixed English with what sounded like Crintac terminology. How long had they been living here? Celia stepped forward, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "Hello?" Both children spun toward her, and faster than she could blink, Jonah had produced what looked like a Crintac energy blade, scaled down to fit a child's hands, but no less deadly for its size. Penny immediately moved behind her brother, her own hand reaching for something at her belt. "Human," Jonah said, and his voice carried an odd accent, colonial English filtered through years of alien influence. "Adult type, unknown affiliation." He paused, studying Celia's equipment. "Galactic Council markings." These weren't just human children. These were human children who'd been trained to assess threats, identify technology, and respond with military precision. What the hell had happened here? "My name is Celia," she said carefully, keeping her hands visible. "I heard someone calling for help." Penny perked up. That was probably Marcus or Elena. They've been trying to fix the long-range transmitter for weeks. She looked at Jonah. Should we trust her? Council types don't usually come to the surface, Jonah replied, not lowering his weapon. The elders made sure of that. The elders told the council types to stay away? The elders tell everyone to stay away. Jonah's expression darkened, except when they don't. There was a story there, a big, ugly story that Celia suspected she wasn't going to like. Jonah, how long have you been living here? All my life, he replied. Penny too. We're third generation. Third generation. That meant these children were the grandchildren of the original colonists. The math was starting to make terrible sense. What happened to the New Geneva? Both children went very still. Penny's eyes widened, and Jonah's grip on his weapon tightened. How do you know about the New Geneva? He asked quietly. Because I think that's your ship. Or was, anyway. A new voice spoke from behind Celia, and she spun to find herself facing what appeared to be an elderly Krintak. But this one was different. Smaller than the elders she'd encountered, with scars across his exoskeleton and eyes that held a distinctly un-alien warmth. The ship was destroyed 50 years ago, human Celia, the Krintak said, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of his species, but with an oddly gentle cadence. Shot down by young fools who thought they were protecting their world from invaders. Kethmar! Penny broke away from her brother and ran to the alien, who caught her in what could only be described as a hug. You're back. Did you bring more of the healing crystal things? Of course, little spark, Kethmar replied, producing a small pouch from his robes. And some of the taste-good foods from the northern groves. Celia stared. A Krintak elder, even a scarred, apparently exiled one, was hugging human children and bringing them snacks. This was not how any of her xenobiology textbooks said first contact was supposed to work. You're wondering how this is possible, Kethmar observed, his compound eyes focusing on her. How the children of your species came to live alongside one of mine. The thought had crossed my mind, Celia replied dryly. Jonah finally lowered his weapon, though he kept it ready. Kethmar saved our grandparents after the crash, helped them build the first shelters, taught them how to find food and water. When the other elders found out, he trailed off, his expression grim. When the other elders found out, they declared the survivors a contamination risk, Kethmar finished. The debate raged for cycles. Some wanted to relocate your people to another world. Others wanted to ensure the contamination could not spread. And you? I wanted to help them survive. Your species is remarkable, adaptable. The children learned our technologies, our languages, our ways of moving through the world. In return, they taught us about human resilience, human creativity. Kethmar's mandibles clicked in what Celia was learning to recognize as amusement. Did you know that human laughter is actually therapeutic for Krintak mental disorders? I did not know that. Neither did we, until little Penny here cured my depression with a joke about crystal worms. Celia looked around at the unlikely scene. Human children who spoke alien languages and carried energy weapons, living in caves under the protection of an exiled Krintak who brought them snacks and healing crystals. It was like something out of a fever dream, except it was real and happening right in front of her. So what's the current situation? She asked. Why are the children still here? Why haven't you contacted the Galactic Council? The temperature in the clearing seemed to drop several degrees. Jonah and Penny exchanged glances, and Kethmar's scarred exoskeleton darkened to a deeper shade of black. Because, Kethmar said quietly, the current Elder Council has decided that the human survivors represent too great a risk to Krintak society. They have been pressuring me to find a permanent solution. What kind of permanent solution? The kind that ensures human voices are never heard from this world again. The words hit Celia like a physical blow. She looked at the children, bright, brave, impossible children who'd somehow built a life in the space between two civilizations, and felt a rage building in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. Over my dead body, she said. Kethmar's mandibles clicked again, but this time it wasn't amusement. That, human Celia, may be precisely what Elder Mordak has in mind. A low, harmonic tone echoed through the canyon, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Penny grabbed Jonah's hand, and both children immediately started moving toward the caves. "Patrol ships," Jonah explained, his young face set in lines that spoke of too much experience with danger. "They're early today." "How early?" Celia asked. "Early enough that they might have detected your landing," Kethmar replied grimly. "We need to reach the deep caves. Now." As they ran through the crystalline forest, dodging between alien trees and leaping over streams that glowed with bioluminescent algae, Celia couldn't help but marvel at the children's grace and speed. They moved like they'd been born to this world, which, she supposed, they had. Behind them, the harmonic tones grew closer, and somewhere in those sounds, Celia was beginning to hear something else. Anger. The Krintak patrol wasn't just doing a routine sweep. They were hunting. The deep caves turned out to be less cave and more underground alien metropolis, which really shouldn't have surprised Celia at this point. Nothing about this mission had gone according to plan. So why should the laws of geology be any different? Ancient Krintak architecture spiraled down into the planet's crust, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed with a gentle blue-green light. But scattered throughout the organic alien design were distinctly human modifications. Reinforced bulkheads made from starship plating, jury-rigged power systems, and what appeared to be a hydroponic garden growing earth vegetables in crystalline Krintak growing chambers. "Welcome to New Geneva Station," Jonah announced with the kind of casual pride that only children could muster when showing off their impossible home. "Population, 23 humans, 1 cranky Krintak, and whatever Otto counts as..." "Otto?" Celia blinked. "You have an AI down here?" "Not your Otto," Penny giggled. "Our Otto. Well, he's actually called Operational Tactical and Translation Officer, but that's a mouthful, so we just call him Otto too. He's from the original ship." A familiar holographic projection flickered to life, but this one looked distinctly different from her ship's AI. Where her Otto wore a neat bow tie, this one sported what appeared to be a hand-knitted scarf and tiny eyeglasses that served no functional purpose whatsoever. "Greetings, Commander Celia," the cave Otto said, adjusting his spectacles. "I do hope you'll forgive the informal appearance. The children have been customizing my aesthetic protocols for the past 50 years. 50 years? Celia stared. "You've been operational this whole time?" "Indeed. Someone had to keep the historical records, maintain the essential systems, and ensure the children didn't accidentally blow themselves up while experimenting with Krintak biotechnology." The AI's expression became somewhat fond. "Though I must admit, they've become remarkably proficient at both human and Krintak engineering. Little Marcus, well, not so little anymore, managed to integrate quantum processing cores with bioneural networks last month. Quite impressive, really." As if summoned by his name, a teenager appeared from deeper in the complex. Marcus looked to be about 16, with the lean build of someone who'd grown up in low gravity and the confident movements of a natural engineer. He nodded politely to Celia before turning to Jonah. "The resonance dampeners are online," he reported. "That should keep the patrol ships from detecting our power signatures. But if they do a detailed sweep..." He shrugged. "They'll find us eventually," Jonah finished. "How many are out there?" 3 cruisers, standard patrol configuration. Elder Mordak's personal command ship." Marcus paused. "Kethmar. They're broadcasting surrender demands. They want the contaminated specimens handed over for proper disposal." The euphemistic language made Celia's skin crawl. These people, these monsters, were talking about children like they were toxic waste to be disposed of. "Well," she said aloud, "that's not happening." Kethmar settled his bulk onto what appeared to be a chair grown from living crystal, his scarred exoskeleton dim in the bioluminescent light. "You do not understand the full scope of the problem, human Celia. This situation is complex. Enlighten me." "The New Geneva was not lost in an accident." Kethmar's voice carried a weight of old pain. 50 years ago, a faction of young Krintak, warriors who believed that contact with other species would weaken our civilization, intercepted your colony ship. They attacked without provocation, without warning, without honor. Penny had settled on the floor beside the old Krintak, leaning against his leg like a child with a favorite grandfather. The casual intimacy of the gesture spoke volumes about their relationship. "Tell her about the rescue," Penny prompted. "There were survivors," Kethmar continued. 18 adults, 12 children. Your people were resourceful. They managed to get to escape pods before the ship was destroyed. I found them 3 days later, injured and afraid, trying to build shelter in the ruins of an old ceremonial site. "And you helped them," Celia said. "I tried to. I brought supplies, medical aid, taught them how to survive on our world. But when the Elder Council learned of their existence—" "Civil war," Jonah said quietly. "That's what Kethmar calls it. Though it wasn't much of a war. More like an argument with energy weapons." Marcus nodded grimly. "The Elders split into 3 factions. The isolationists wanted all humans eliminated immediately. The relocators wanted to move the survivors to another world, far from Crintak space. And the integrationists wanted to help them adapt and become part of our society," Kethmar finished. "The integrationists lost, badly. Most of my faction was exiled or executed. I was allowed to live only because I agreed to contain the human contamination." "Contain," Celia repeated, "by keeping them hidden." "By keeping them alive," Kethmar corrected. "Elder Mordak made it clear that if the humans ever left this world, or if their existence became known to the galactic community, both they and I would be eliminated." The pieces were falling into place now, and the picture they formed was uglier than Celia had imagined. So, the Crintak have been playing galactic peacekeepers, claiming to protect primitive species, while actually covering up a massacre. "Not just covering it up," Marcus said, "perfecting it. They've been using us as a test case, figuring out how to eliminate contaminating species without leaving evidence. What they learned here, they've applied elsewhere." Cave Otto's projection flickered. "I have documented evidence of at least 6 other incidents in Crintak space over the past 50 years. Mysterious disappearances of exploration vessels, colony ships that simply vanished without trace, always in systems under Crintak protection." Celia felt sick. "How many people are we talking about?" "Thousands," the AI replied quietly. "Possibly tens of thousands. The Crintak have become very efficient at what they call civilization management. And the Galactic Council has no idea." "Why would they?" Jonah asked, with the bitter wisdom of someone far too young to sound so cynical. "The Crintak are model citizens. They maintain the peace, protect primitive worlds, and never cause any diplomatic incidents. They're the perfect partner species." "Because they eliminate all the evidence," Celia breathed. A new voice spoke from the cave entrance, young, female, and distinctly alien. "Which is why what you're doing here is so dangerous," human female. Everyone spun to see a Crintak, unlike any Celia had encountered before. Where the elders were massive and intimidating, this one was smaller, more graceful, with an exoskeleton that gleamed silver instead of black. Her compound eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost familiar. "Rintel," Kethmar said, and there was both relief and worry in his harmonic voice. "You should not be here." "Neither should she," Rintel replied, gesturing toward Celia. "But here we all are, making choices that will get us all killed." "Rintel is—" Penny started. "Complicated," Jonah finished. "She's from the patrol ships, but she's also been helping us sometimes." "I am what you might call a reformed isolationist," Rintel explained. "I believed, as many of my generation did, that contact with other species would weaken us. Then I met these children." She gestured toward the humans. "And I learned that I was wrong." "Wrong how?" "We thought that other species would contaminate our purity, make us less than we were. But these children, they have taken the best of both our peoples and made something new, something stronger." Rintel's mandibles clicked in what Celia was learning to recognize as Crintak laughter. Little Penny once repaired a quantum resonance cascade using nothing but scavenged parts and what she called thinky thoughts. She is 8 cycles old and already understands technology that most of my species take decades to master. 6 cycles, Penny corrected. "I won't be 8 for another 2 months." 6 cycles, Rintel amended. "Even more impressive." Marcus was monitoring something on a hand-built scanner. his expression growing increasingly tense. "The patrol ships are moving to surround the canyon. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." Kethmar rose from his crystal chair, his massive form suddenly looking every one of his considerable years. "There is nowhere left to run. We have hidden here for 50 years, but Mordak has finally decided that the risk of discovery is too great. He means to end this." "How many ships does he have?" Celia asked. "3 cruisers, as Marcus said. Approximately 90 warriors total." Rintel consulted her own scanner. "Plus ground support units moving in from the north and east." "And we have?" 23 humans, most of them children. 1 elderly Krintak. 1 young Krintak, who is technically committing treason by being here. And you." Jonah's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather instead of impossible odds. "Actually," Marcus said thoughtfully, "we might have one more advantage." "Which is?" The teenager grinned, and for the first time since Celia had met these remarkable children, he looked like what he was, a kid who was about to show off something really cool. 50 years of living between 2 technologies, learning both, and mixing them together in ways nobody ever thought possible. He gestured toward the cave walls, and Celia suddenly noticed that what she'd taken for decorative patterns were actually integrated circuit pathways, bio-neural networks, and quantum processing cores, all working in perfect harmony. "Marcus," she said slowly, "what exactly have you kids been building down here?" His grin widened. "Want to find out?" What Marcus had built, it turned out, was nothing short of a technological miracle wrapped in teenage ingenuity and held together with what appeared to be spite and determination. "Behold," he announced with a dramatic flourish that would have made any theater major proud, "the most illegally advanced communication array in known space." Celia stared at the massive chamber he'd led them to, where crystalline Krintak bioprocessors grew like trees around salvaged human quantum transmitters, the whole system pulsing with synchronized light patterns that made her eyes water. "Marcus, what am I looking at?" "Galactic range broadcasting capability with real-time translation protocols and full holographic projection," Penny announced proudly. "Marcus spent 3 years growing the bio-neural networks and teaching them to talk to our quantum cores." "It can reach every major system in Council space," Jonah added. "Every news network, every government communication hub, every military command center." Simultaneously, Rintel's compound eyes were wide with what Celia suspected was either admiration or horror. This should not be possible. The processing power alone. "Human creativity plus Krintak biotechnology," Marcus said with a shrug. "Turns out they work really well together when you stop worrying about whether it's supposed to work and just focus on making it work." Cave Otto flickered into existence beside the array, his hand-knitted scarf somehow managing to look dignified. "I should mention that activating this system will immediately reveal our location to every sensor array within 3 light years, including Elder Mordak's forces." "Good," Celia said grimly. "Let him come. Marcus, how fast can we get this thing online?" "It's already online," he replied, hands dancing over control surfaces that were part touch screen, part living crystal, and part things that Celia couldn't identify. "I just need to know what we're broadcasting." Celia looked around at the impossible gathering. Human children who spoke alien languages and built technology that shouldn't exist. A Krintak exile who'd given up everything to protect them. A young alien warrior who'd chosen conscience over species loyalty. And an AI who'd spent 50 years documenting atrocities while teaching kids to laugh. "We're going to tell the truth," she said simply. "All of it." The first patrol ship dropped into the canyon just as Marcus activated the transmission array. The crystalline spires throughout the cave complex lit up like a Christmas tree, and every communications receiver in known space suddenly found itself on the receiving end of the galaxy's most unauthorized broadcast. "This is Commander Celia of the Galactic Council vessel Harmony's Edge," she began, standing before the main transmitter as holographic projectors captured her image and beamed it across the stars. "I am broadcasting from the surface of Kepler 438b, where I have discovered evidence of systematic genocide being conducted by the Krintak Elder Council." Through the cave's sensors, she could see Elder Mordak's massive form emerging from his command ship, flanked by enough armed warriors to level a small city. His harmonic voice echoed through the canyon, amplified by his ship's speakers. Human Celia, you have interfered with Krintak internal affairs for the last time. Surrender the contaminated specimens, and your death will be swift. You hear that? Celia continued her broadcast, gesturing toward the cave entrance where Mordak's voice was still echoing. That's Elder Mordak of the Krintak Council, referring to human children as contaminated specimens. Children whose only crime was surviving when their colony ship was shot down 50 years ago. Jonah stepped into the holographic field beside her, his young face serious but unafraid. My name is Jonah. I'm 8 years old, and I'm the great-grandson of colonists from the ship New Geneva. We've been living here our whole lives, learning from the Krintak who helped us, building a community that bridges our two species. The Elder Council wants us dead because we prove that cooperation is possible. Penny bounced into view next, because of course she did. I'm Penny. I can speak Krintak and human, and I built a quantum resonance thingy last week. Look! She held up a device that was humming with energy, and definitely shouldn't have been stable in the hands of a 6-year-old. Penny, put that down before you accidentally open a wormhole, Marcus called from behind the cameras. I'm not going to open a wormhole, probably. Despite everything, the armed aliens outside, the impossible situation, the fact that she was probably about to die, Celia found herself smiling. These kids were absolutely fearless. Kethmar moved into the transmission field, his scarred exoskeleton catching the light. I am Kethmar, formerly of the Krintak Elder Council. 50 years ago, I watched my people commit an act of unprovoked aggression against a peaceful human colony. When I tried to help the survivors, I was branded a traitor. The Council has spent 5 decades covering up this crime, and dozens of others like it. The sound of energy weapons charging echoed through the caves. Mordak was done talking. Cave Otto, Celia called. Are we reaching the Council networks? Broadcasting to all major systems, Commander. I'm receiving confirmations from news networks, military commands, and... Oh my. It appears we've interrupted a session of the Galactic Senate. They're watching live. Perfect. Celia turned back to the cameras. Members of the Galactic Council, what you're about to witness is the attempted murder of human children by the same species we've trusted to maintain peace in this sector. I want you to remember this moment, because this is what Krintak protection actually looks like. The first energy blast shattered the cave entrance, sending crystalline debris raining down around them. But instead of cowering, the human children moved with practiced efficiency. Marcus activated defensive systems that Celia hadn't even known existed, while Jonah and several other kids took positions behind cover with weapons that blended human engineering with Krintak biotechnology. Now would be a good time for that wormhole, Penny, Jonah called, as more energy blasts lit up the cave. I told you, I'm not going to open a wormhole, Penny shouted back, working frantically at a control panel. But I might be able to do something even better. Rintel appeared in the transmission field, her silver exoskeleton gleaming. I am Rintel of the Krintak 4th generation. I stand with these humans against the crimes of my elders. We are not all monsters. From deeper in the cave complex, other young Krintak began to appear. Apparently, Rintel hadn't come alone. They moved to defensive positions alongside the human children, their weapons trained on the entrance where Elder Mordak's forces were advancing. Well, Celia said to the cameras, it looks like we're not going down without a fight. That's when Penny's something even better kicked in. The entire cave system suddenly blazed with light as every bioluminescent panel activated simultaneously. But more than that, the light was carrying information, broadcasting on frequencies that resonated directly with Krintak neural networks. It was a communication method that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the emotional centers of the alien brain. And what it was saying, in the universal language of harmonics and light, was simple. These are our children. They are precious. They are innocent. They are loved. The advancing Krintak warriors stopped dead in their tracks, their weapons lowering involuntarily as the emotional resonance washed over them. Even Elder Mordak stumbled, his massive form swaying as the harmonic message penetrated his consciousness. How? Rintel breathed. 50 years of living with Kethmar, Penny said proudly. I learned how Krintak emotions work. You can't hurt someone you recognize as family. Cave Otto's projection appeared beside them, his scarf somehow looking even more dignified. Commander, I'm receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council. They're demanding immediate cessation of hostilities and full diplomatic immunity for all humans on the surface. And from the Krintak homeworld, Marcus added, monitoring his own communications. Looks like the younger generation is staging some kind of revolt. They're demanding Elder Mordak's immediate recall and the establishment of formal diplomatic relations with the human survivors. Through the cave's sensors, Celia could see the massive elder standing motionless in the canyon, his warriors frozen around him. The harmonic message was still broadcasting, and she could see other Krintak ships arriving. But these bore the markings of the younger generation, not the Elder Council. Elder Mordak's voice finally broke through the harmonic resonance, but it was different now, strained, uncertain. This is impossible. They are alien. They are contamination. No, came a new voice, as a sleek silver ship settled into the canyon. The figure that emerged was clearly Krintak, but younger, with the same silver exoskeleton as Rintel. They are evolution. Elder Cinera, for that's who it had to be, based on Rintel's excited clicking, approached the cave entrance with her arms spread in the universal gesture of peace. Elder Mordak, by the authority of the Reformed Council, you are relieved of command. The age of isolation is over. You cannot. I can, and I have. Cinera's voice carried the harmonic authority of true leadership. The younger generations have seen what these children represent. Not contamination, but possibility. Not weakness, but strength through unity. Celia watched as Krintak warriors began laying down their weapons, their own young voices joining the harmonic song that Penny had started. It was a revolution, she realized, not of violence, but of understanding. Commander, Cave Otto announced, I'm receiving formal requests for asylum from over 200 Krintak throughout the sector. It appears the broadcast has triggered a rather significant cultural shift. Mordak's massive form sagged as his own warriors turned away from him, drawn by the promise of something better than fear and isolation. 50 years, he whispered. 50 years of maintaining order. 50 years of maintaining lies, Kethmar corrected gently, emerging from the cave. Old friend, it is time to let the children show us a better way. 6 months later, Celia stood on the observation deck of what was now officially called New Geneva Diplomatic Station, the first joint human Krintak colony in galactic history. The amber clouds of Kepler 438b swirled peacefully below, and the crystalline spires of the surface now gleamed with both human and Krintak architecture. Commander, Otto said, her Otto this time, though he'd taken to wearing a small scarf in honor of his cave-dwelling counterpart, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. It appears they want to offer you a commendation for discovering revolutionary advances in interspecies cooperation. Celia snorted. Revolutionary advances? Right. As if I discovered anything. I just listened to kids crying and decided to do something about it. Through the viewports, she could see Penny and Jonah racing through the station's corridors, chasing after what appeared to be a young Krintak, who was carrying what definitely looked like an unstable quantum device. Some things, apparently, never changed. Marcus emerged from one of the engineering bays, now wearing the insignia of the youngest department head in Galactic Council history. His hybrid human Krintak technologies were revolutionizing everything from communications to medicine, and 3 different universities were fighting over the right to study his work. Commander, he called, we're getting reports of another lost colony ship in the Vega sector. The locals are claiming it's a primitive species protection zone, but you think otherwise? I think, Marcus said with a grin that was equal parts teenager and genius, that there might be more kids out there who need someone to hear them crying. Celia looked out at the peaceful planet below, where human laughter mixed with Krintak harmonic songs, where children of 2 species learned and played and built impossible things together. Well then, she said, I guess we'd better go listen. After all, sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply hear someone calling for help, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book to do something about it.